Welcome back to the World of Aqua. I'm Samantha, and in case you missed episode 1, I discussed the World of Aqua series with a deep dive into all of our extension systems. Tips, tricks, do's, don'ts, all the in between. In this episode, I'll be discussing the 3 Weft extension systems that we carry, some tips and tricks on who would benefit from each, as well as maybe some challenges you're experiencing behind the chair with the systems. So the best way to truly see the representation of all 3 Weft systems is to do this on a live model. Let's get started. I'm here with my beautiful model Taylor, and we'll be using Taylor for our Weft demonstration. First, let's discuss the hand-tied Weft. The hand-tied Weft was our original Weft and still has a unique purpose behind the chair. A hand-tied Weft is called a hand-tied Weft because the Weft itself is handmade. Every individual hair is hand sewn onto the Weft. The hand-tied Weft is very delicate and fine, allowing it to be super customizable. However, the Weft itself, because it's handmade, cannot be cut. Once the Weft is cut, it will completely unravel. We never recommend cutting the hand-tied Weft. However, we will fold and stack the Weft in place into our section needed. So you're probably wondering, why would I use a hand-tied Weft over another Weft? The hand-tied Weft, still super awesome, mostly because the Weft itself is porous, right? The Weft, meaning the thread that holds this entire Weft together, will absorb hair color. Meaning, if I am custom coloring my Weft, right? I'm starting with a blonde Weft, making the root a little darker. The Weft itself will absorb that darker hair color. Some challenges you may have experienced with hand-tied Weft in the past. Maybe your hand-tied Weft was too wide and you had to do a lot of folding and stacking in place. Maybe the hand-tied Weft you were using had a really long return or mustache, causing some matting and tangling at the top. Or maybe your hand-tied Weft came unraveled very easily, right? These are very common challenges with hand-tied Weft on the market. Now, what truly makes our hand-tied Weft very unique is our 11-inch width, our very short return. Our return, or the mustache of the Weft, is only roughly 1 inch long. Now, you're probably wondering, why does that matter? So let's break down the Weft. The hair is fully Remy hair, meaning the cuticle is still intact, and the cuticle is facing the same direction. Now, when the hair is knotted around the thread, this is one end of the hair. The other end of the hair is the end of the return. Once the hair is flopped over, the top of the hair now is non-Remy hair. If the return is too long, that's when you will get that matting and tangling at the top. So I'm going to install the hand-tied Weft here just on the side of Taylor's hair, just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to fold the Weft in place and just fill the side. This way I can compare the hand-tied Weft, the machine Weft, and then our Q Weft side by side. For this installation, I am going to fold the hand-tied Weft in half, allowing for the fold to be right in the front, over top of that front bead. Okay, so as you can see, our hand-tied Weft is in place. I folded and placed it just on the right side here. Now, for educational purposes, I am going to use blonde thread so you can see all of my stitching. However, if Taylor were my client in the salon, I would actually choose our dark brown thread because that matches her base color. Okay, so the thread colors that we have are blonde, brown, which is a lighter brown, dark brown, and then black. I would choose the thread color that matches her natural base tone. And as you can see, I already pre-beaded her with dark brown beads. Again, the dark brown beads match her dark brown base. The bead and the thread colors come in the same 4 colors. Now, additionally, I am using cotton thread for this application, but we do have nylon thread as well. The cotton thread is a double cotton thread. Some benefits to the cotton would definitely be it's thicker. It has a little bit more grip to it. So if you are brand new to sewing, I always recommend to start with cotton. Now, once you're more comfortable, once you have your routine down, you can move on to nylon. Nylon's definitely much thinner and is a little bit more slippery. So nylon is phenomenal if you're a little bit more advanced or if you want just an overall thinner, cleaner application. I'm going to go ahead and start applying this hand-tied Weft. Now, while I do my application, I am going to stop and give you some tips and tricks on the application, as well as dive a little deeper into the hand-tied Weft. Okay, so I wanted to pause for a moment. I went ahead and did Taylor's first 3 knots, and now I want to address the challenge of Okay, I don't love hand-tied weft because I have to fold. And how do I really tack down that front fold? Are you with me? Does this happen to you? Or maybe when you used hand-tied weft, this happened to you? So you notice the way I laid her hand-tied weft, I do have this front fold that lives right in front of my front bead. How many of us currently run into this issue? Right, your client picks up the fold's flapping in the wind. What do we do with that front fold? I'm gonna show you a trick on how to tack that front fold down as you're sewing and allow it to lay very natural and flat. So I just did my first lock knot on bead 1. Now I'm going to insert my needle through the hair above the bead, kick it at a diagonal forward, and exit through the very corner of my weft. So it looks like this. And I'm going to exit on the very edge of my weft. So I'm not going behind the bead, I'm going next to the bead. And I'm going to do what we call a loop knot. So I'm going to do a half spin and come straight up through my loop and tighten. So as I begin to tighten this, you'll see the corner of this weft almost smile up. So you see the corner just sort of smiling up and laying a little bit flatter to her scalp. So there's my first loop knot. Now I'm actually going to do 2 to 3 of those all the way to the very corner of that weft so it lays nice and flat. So I'll do my second one directly in front of my first. So the hair above the bead, diagonal forward, and come right to the edge of my weft. I do a half turn on my loop and come straight up through. Slowly pull. Now again, making sure I don't grab all of those mustache hairs. So again, we have all those return hairs. I want to make sure they lay nice and flat the whole time. So I do my second loop knot, and you see that instantly laid that corner down. Now, if you still have a little bit of leftover, I would go ahead and do a third loop knot on that corner, just to make sure your last loop knot is at the very edge of your weft. So now that I did my 2 to 3 loop knots at a diagonal forward, again, that just really laid that front corner down. Now I will go back to bead 1, do my next lock knot, and work my way back. So my hand-tied weft is completely installed. You can see the front corner is laying nice and flat, and I installed it with our traditional weft application. Now this hand-tied weft, I folded into thirds. So I essentially took my 11-inch weft, folded the right side in and the left side right over top. So there are 3 layers of hand-tied weft here. Next, let's talk about our machine weft. The machine weft is the most dense weft. So this weft consists of 3 smaller machine weft layers, all sewn together to make one dense machine weft. The machine weft is one 30-inch wide weft that can be cut down into smaller widths. So for instance, if I were placing this machine weft in this full row, I would measure the weft around the row and cut as needed. Now this weft is super unique because it's made up of 3 smaller layers instead of your standard 2 layers. So I can deconstruct this weft in order to remove some weight, remove some bulkiness, or let's say I truly want to customize this look. If I'm ordering 1 pack of machine weft, but I really truly need 2 different colors, I could order 2 different colors of machine weft, deconstruct 1 layer off of the machine weft, swap the 2, and truly customize the coloring needed. Now I'm going to place the machine weft on the opposite side that I laid the hand-tied weft. So let's measure the section needed. And I'll cut my machine weft. Now notice when I cut, you will lose a few hairs at your cut point, but besides that, this weft is very strong and durable. It's not going to unravel like a hand-tied weft. So now that I cut and measured this section, if I truly want to customize this weft, like I said, I can deconstruct it. So what that looks like is I would take my small scissors and essentially cut along the top seam to split this weft into 2. So make sure just to snip the thread that's holding both wefts together. So notice I'm just cutting along the seam. Now, yes, you can use a seam ripper for this as well. Once I start to snip out this thread, notice I'm separating this weft into 2. Now you're probably thinking, wait, you said this can be deconstructed into 3 layers. Yes, I did. First, we'll separate into 2 layers, and then I'm going to take one of these layers, separate that into 2 more, and that's where I'm getting my 3 separate layers. So see, I'm deconstructing down into 2. Now I can take this bottom layer. Notice it has a small seam. I'll cut along that seam to then deconstruct into 3. And you can see my 3 separate layers here that make up this machine weft. So you're probably asking yourself, do I have to deconstruct the weft? Absolutely not. The benefit of the machine weft is it's very thick and dense. So if your client has extremely thick, dense hair, using this machine weft full is perfect. That allows you to not have to stack multiple layers in place. It's already done for you. However, if this 3-layered weft is too dense, you can then start to deconstruct. So what I like to do is think about it. Most of your clients are finer on the sides and more dense in the back, would you say? So when I'm measuring for my machine weft, I typically will deconstruct at least 1 layer off just my first 3 bead section back. So I'll measure, deconstruct the top layer just on my first 3 beads and remove that top layer. What that does is allows the side to lay nice and flat. So I'm just going to deconstruct this a little bit more than I did. Just back to bead 3 and remove that top layer. So now we can see I have 3 layers here and only 2 on the side. Now again, if she is even finer than that on the side and these 2 layers are too much, I could deconstruct 1 more layer off. Another pro tip would be, let's say your guest has a money piece or she's a little bit brighter in the front. What you could do is measure, deconstruct that top layer off your first 1, 2, or 3 beads and replace it with a brighter color. So I could take a small inch section and replace that with a little bit brighter of a blonde to give her that bright pop in the front, but the rest of your darker shade in the back. I clipped the machine weft in place. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the same way I installed the hand-tied weft on the other side. We completed our machine weft row and it looks like this. So you can see the first 3 beads, I had deconstructed that top layer off. So we have 2 layers here. And then the 3 layers that come intact on the machine weft here. And I applied it using our traditional weft method. So before we talk about our 3rd and final weft, I want to compare the machine weft to the hand-tied weft. So here's our machine weft, and we used color Arctic Rooted. Now spin to the hand-tied weft side, also in Arctic Rooted. So notice the difference is, the hand-tied weft, while there are 3 layers in this row, it lays much flatter and finer at the band than the machine weft. So you see how long my knots are on my machine weft because the weft itself is much thicker versus my hand-tied weft has much smaller knots because the weft is finer. Then let's look at the density. So the density of this machine weft here versus the density on our hand-tied weft here. So the machine weft just naturally has more hair than the hand-tied weft. Now let's discuss our 3rd and final weft, our Q weft, which is our latest technology of weft that actually won Beauty Launchpad's award for 2024 in Best Weft category. Now you may know our Q weft as a genius weft or a hybrid weft. What makes the Q weft so unique and why I chose to share it last is it's truly the best of both worlds between a hand-tied weft and a machine weft. Some challenges you may have experienced with a hand-tied or machine weft, we talked about the hand-tied weft not being cuttable. Right? Once you do cut a hand-tied weft, it completely unravels. Now let's talk about a machine weft. A machine weft, some downfalls to it, it is dense, right? I showed you the difference of a hand-tied versus the machine weft on our model Taylor. The machine weft has the same layers stacked as my hand-tied weft application, but the machine weft was just more dense at the base, allowing it not to live quite as flat. Our Q weft solves both of those challenges in one weft. The Q-weft is one continuous 35-inch weft that's just as flat laying as the hand-tied weft, but it's cuttable. So it's not going to shed, it's not going to unravel like a hand-tied weft would. Now another huge benefit of a Q-weft is there's no mustache whatsoever. So those return hairs, those pesky little mustache hairs, are non-existent on a Q-weft. So you may have used other Genius wefts in the past. Our Q-weft is very unique because of the polyurethane seal. It allows for the weft to be much more durable. So let's first measure the section from end to end with the Q-weft. So I'll measure here, ensuring I give myself a little extra slack just to make sure it fits from my first bead to my last. And because this weft is cuttable, I'm just going to cut here. Now just to keep everything even, I'm actually going to lay 3 layers in this row so you can truly see the density of the hand-tied, the Q-weft, and the machine weft side by side. So I'm going to take my second layer, use my guide that I already cut, and cut layer number 2. I'll do the same thing one more time with layer number 3. Okay, so I have all 3 layers of my Q-weft in place, and I will stack them right here in the middle back. Now, some challenges you may have experienced with a Genius weft in the past. Who has challenges with the weft slipping and not holding in place, right? You stacked up layers and one slides a little easier than what a hand-tied or what a machine weft may because of the material of the band, right? Are you with me? That may have been a challenge you've had in the past. I'm going to show you during this application how you can avoid that challenge and pre-tie them together before the application. Now this can be done one of 2 ways. If you do have a co-artist or an assistant in the salon, they can hold this weft while you tie them together. If you do not, I would recommend to clip all 3 wefts in place first. So make sure all 3 layers are here and clip them in place, ensuring that all 3 layers are fully to the top. Okay, now that I have all 3 layers stacked, just going to grab a needle with a small amount of thread. Now I am using my dark brown thread, so this stitch just disappears and it does not interfere with all of my sewing. So what I want to do is start on the right or left, and I'm just going to grab all 3 of my wefts and attach a small knot around all 3 wefts. Now I'm not attaching this to her hair, her natural hair whatsoever, just the wefts. Okay, and I'm just going to do a small tack knot and cut the ends. Notice how that tack knot attached all 3 of my wefts together. I'll do this periodically throughout this section just to make sure all of my wefts are attached and they don't slide during my application. Okay, so you can see I did 3 small tack knots here just to attach all 3 layers of the weft together. Now you can do as many or as little as you'd like just to ensure no slipping. Now just to reiterate, these tack knots are totally not necessary. These will serve the purpose if you've had a challenge with any Genius weft or even our Q-weft in the past, slipping and sliding. This will completely eliminate any of that slipping. From here, we'll go ahead and sew this weft in place. So we just completed the application of our Q-weft, and you can see here in the middle, the Q-weft is installed. Again, just like the other 2 applications, I installed it as our traditional weft method. And 3 wefts stacked into place. Now first I want to compare the Q-weft to the hand-tied weft. So here's my hand-tied weft. Remember, it's one hand-tied weft folded into 3 layers. And here I have one Q-weft cut into 3 layers and stacked. So here's the 2 side by side. They look very, very similar, right? They're both laying very flat to the head. But you can see how the Q-weft lays just a little bit more flat because it doesn't have thread as the weft itself. So you can see hand-tied weft lives a little bit higher because the weft is actually thread, versus the Q weft is laying a little bit more flat just because of the material. Now second, look at the density difference. Okay, hand-tied weft versus Q weft. The Q weft has much more density in the same size section with the same amount of layering. Hand-tied versus Q. The Q weft is definitely much more dense than the hand-tied weft. Let's compare the Q weft to the machine weft. So here's my machine weft section, and here's my Q weft. Immediately you can tell the Q weft lays much more flat than the machine weft. Okay? The knots are much smaller because the band or the weft itself is not nearly as thick or dense. You can see the density. The Q weft is pretty dense with 3 stacked in place. It's almost just as dense as our machine weft. Versus the machine weft and the hand-tied weft had a pretty distinct density difference. So remember, I use blonde thread just for educational purposes. I would never actually choose blonde thread for Taylor's hair because she has a brown base. So she has a dark brown base here. I would choose the dark brown thread if she were my client. So here's the machine weft. Then we go into our Q weft. And then we finish off with hand-tied weft. So now that we have all 3 wefts in one row, I want to compare and contrast the wefts. Who would benefit from one weft over another? Now, realistically, anyone can wear either one of these wefts. If you have fine density hair, you can wear a hand-tied, a Q weft, or even a machine weft once the machine weft is deconstructed into a smaller layer. Okay? If you have medium or very heavy density hair, again, you can wear either 3. The machine weft already comes pre-constructed in those 3 layers, so you don't have to worry about stacking additional layers. Versus the hand-tied or Q weft, you do have to customize and stack multiple layers in the row to create that density. So there's truly no right or wrong, but there are some that are easier for some hair types versus others. Again, if they're very thick and dense, machine weft is already pre-done for you. But if they're very fine, Q weft can be cut to fit in a row perfectly without any folding, right? Folding creates extra density. So there's no right or wrong weft to choose. It truly depends on maybe the guest's budget. Okay, machine weft is the most budget-friendly weft, or it may depend on the time you're allowing behind the chair, because one weft may be a little bit more time-consuming than the rest. Okay, so you truly choose the weft that fits the guest's budget, or the weft that fits the guest's density, or what fits their lifestyle overall best. When it comes to lifestyle, it plays a huge role into which weft you're choosing as well. If your guest is very active and she likes to pull her hair up in a high ponytail and wants more of that sleeker look, the machine weft is a little dense for that purpose. So when you pull the machine weft back, because the weft itself is much thicker, you cannot get that sleek high Ariana Grande ponytail that you can truly get with a Q weft or a hand-tied weft. Now, if they truly want the sleekest look, the most flat laying, the Q weft is absolutely number 1 for that. So again, now you're seeing all 3 wefts side by side. You're probably asking, can I intermix the wefts and apply all 3 in one head? Absolutely. Now, would I take and apply 3 in this fashion? Absolutely not, right? We did this for educational purposes. Could you? Totally. You saw that I just did it here, but I wouldn't do it on a client. What I would do is potentially apply a machine weft in one row and then a Q weft or hand-tied weft in another row. Why would I do that? If your guest has a variety of densities throughout her head, let's say she's much more dense in her nape than she is in the crown, or vice versa. Maybe she's really fine in the nape area, but more dense in the crown. I can absolutely take a Q weft and apply that in a small row in her nape area because it is thinner, finer, lays more flat. But then as I work up her head, she may be the most dense around her parietal ridge in the midsection, where a machine weft may make sense, right? So it truly depends on the density of your guest's hair, her overall needs, as to which weft or which combo of wefts you choose. Another reason why I may use multiple wefts in the same application would be for color customization purposes. Okay, so stay with me here. When I discussed deconstructing the machine weft, I talked about doing that for two reasons. One would definitely be density purposes, right? If it's too dense with your 3 layers, deconstruct 1 or 2 off. But then I also talked about color customization. The only downfall, or the biggest downfall to the machine weft, is that one full pack of machine weft is typically enough density for one full head application. But what if your guest needs 2 different colors? And that purpose, you do need to purchase 2 packs of machine weft, which is double the density you need. What you could do is order 1 pack of machine weft and then 1 pack of Q weft or hand-tied weft. Deconstruct a layer from your machine weft, and instead of adding a different machine weft, add in a layer of Q or hand-tied weft just for color purposes, but having the same density. Okay, so essentially taking machine weft, removing 1 or 2 layers, and replacing it with a layer of Q or hand-tied weft. That would be a little bit more cost-effective instead of purchasing 2 packs of machine weft, but still allowing for that color customization. I truly hope this episode brought you educational value and something you can implement immediately behind the chair. I encourage you to step outside of your comfort zone and use a weft system that maybe you're not used to using behind the chair currently. This episode truly just scratched the surface of our weft extensions. If this is something you're wanting to master behind the chair, I encourage you to explore our education and certification offerings. I'm looking forward to seeing you on our next episode where we dive into each of our weft systems.